working using a single oscillator. So they are essentially a source of raw waveforms, patch points that you will be able to modulate some aspects of the oscillator. So the oscillator that I'm working with is one that is highly restrictive in that it is a single oscillator, but it also only has one patch point for modulation, and the choice of what gets modulated has already been decided upon by the manufacturer. Suzanne Ciani, and in several interviews in fact, has explained what complexity meant in terms of academia for her when she was encountering synthesizers, and the sorts of complexity, as I understand it, in terms of reading around the lines here, she's really sort of talking about aspects of what could be termed total serialism. Essentially control all aspects of a performance. The thing about modular synthesis, and she certainly got this as well, is that you actually do have total control pretty much of all of these elements, but not within necessarily in an enforced kind of compositional system, but actually in a quite sort of, I don't really like to use the term that much, but in a quite sort of organic-y sort of performance type system. So these kinds of complexities should not necessarily just be the function of the labour of slaving over a hot score and trying to kind of create something complex that no one's ever heard before, but actually become the conjunction, confluence, the opposition, the working together of a variety of modules, all driven by voltage essentially. And this is really what this video sort of tries to highlight. I learn a lot from kind of working through these things. I also learn a lot in terms of what I transfer into the teaching that I do at the university. They are sources of voltage, and sometimes that voltage can be quite chaotic, or it can be very slow. But then the thing is that we can apply them in quite unique ways, and there is an aspect to this that I believe is actually really important. Is that there's a kind of a democracy in it. There's a democracy that is not dependent upon whether you have fleet fingers, whether your fingers are really, supple and fast. There's things like modular synthesizers allow for a greater democracy. We still might not necessarily always like the ways that things have been put to use. So really, I don't necessarily play pieces. I have kind of situations and I devise some things, kind of like an experiment, but really, and then I let it run. But the thing about this experiment is that we are a part of it. So we're always kind of moving things around, twiddling, fiddling, kind of redirecting the flow, and that's what these sorts of things offer us. What I'm interested in is being able to take a single oscillator and apply complex operations to achieve something that is far greater than just hearing a sequence of 5 notes being randomly distributed. One of the things that becomes apparent once you start to work within these sorts of systems is that you can have a pitch, but the gate information can be completely different. Without a gate, we actually don't have any sound, certainly in this instance. Here's a new gate. Now the notes haven't changed. The notes are still the same. But because of the gate pattern, we're hearing a completely sort of different representation of these 5 notes. Now these gates are operating in a group of 3. There's one gate in the middle of 3 cells. This single gate also has a probability of firing as well, which is why it's quite sparse. This is at 100%, so therefore there's a gate every time the step is encountered. So we have another sort of complex layer that can be added to the sequencer or to the oscillator by altering the gate information. So this is part of that kind of goal of total serialism, whereby each element, whether it's the pitch, the dynamics, the rhythm, can all be operated upon individually to exert total control over a composition. And that's essentially what kind of my goal is here. It only exposes one parameter for modulation purposes, and that's here. So this in itself also presents a bit of a constraint and a challenge in terms of what we do with it. The obvious things that can be done are that you use some kind of cyclical waveform, like another sine wave or a triangle or something else, to modulate it for over long periods of time. That in itself is not necessarily complex, or the sort of complexity that I'm sort of like looking for. What we can do here is essentially be able to place this parameter, have it modulated by another source that is operated upon within the domains of time in terms of the rhythm that is actually applied to it. So that's what I'm sort of trying to do here. So let's have a little listen. So we can hear that there's an opportunity here with the modulation and triggering that modulation for it to also not only just play a role in terms of the timbral shaping, but it can also serve to provide also an additional kind of a sub-rhythm. By being able to tighten up the response of the channel, you can make it quite a clipped. Make it quite much longer. Now we've still only got one oscillator, but we are essentially hearing almost kind of like the superimposition of two figures. You can hear this little da-da-da, da-da-da, which we can tighten up with the envelope. Make it much longer. Now it feels much more like that kind of traditional sort of rise and fall of a triangle or sine wave. By tightening up the envelope, we get an opportunity to insert something new. This is further made to be more complex by the use of the probabilities. The probability allows for a kind of a degree of variation in terms of whether a gate fires or not. It allows the performer to delegate that function to the module. But again, as a performer, at any point, we can choose to amend or change these probabilities. Now, one other area of complexity that can be applied here, and again, this kind of harks back to this total serialism sort of idea, if not adhering to it completely. And that is one to do with registral change. So one of the simplest kind of operations that can be applied here to this sequence of notes without necessarily disturbing the tonality as such is to undergo registral change. So now we have the three items together. We have the note sequence itself, we have a triggered function or envelope that modulates a parameter, and then we also have an additional modulating source that provides us with registral change in terms of transpositions by an octave. Kind of easy to say that these techniques are only really to do in the domain of, say, a modulation or a gate or a sequence of notes, but they can be applied, any of these can be kind of repositioned to essentially operate in a completely different way, and we would get, you know, very much different outputs. One of those could easily be to swap the envelopes. So now the channel 1 that was opening the VCA is now modulating the parameter, and because that's a 16th note division, we get a much more rhythmic shape. But then on the other side, we have this envelope in threes. Which also has a probability that it might not fire. Modular systems allow this kind of repatching. They also allow self-patching, whereby you can take elements of the module and repatch it into itself to essentially generate more complex kind of sounds, more complex modulations, more complex kind of gate patterns. This allows me to explore other domains that would be just a little bit more difficult to do using more traditional means.